everyone, this is Kit Cabela's Hard Lens Media, and this is Perspectives. So, hashtag fire Chris Hayes. Okay, well, what did he do? I mean, did he abuse his power? Did he hurt somebody? Did he say something offensive on MSNBC? I mean, what did he do? I mean, it's trending on Twitter. What's the big deal? What is happening? So, me being curious, I decided to see what all the fuss was about. Turns out, hashtag fire Chris Hayes is trending because he did a segment on the Tara Reade allegations. Okay, vote blue no matter who crowd, Biden supporters, establishment Democrats. Why? I mean, seriously, we're living in opposite land. We got to be careful now of what we report in the media now, because your champion, your guy, Joe Biden, might be a flawed individual who has abused his power. And of course, the media, journalists, it's our responsibility to hold those in power accountable. I mean, let's look into this story. Let's find out what happened. But hashtag fire Chris Hayes because he did a segment. I mean, talk about being desperate. Talk about really showing your hypocrisy. Because let's say Biden was a Republican or some kind of Trump supporter or some sort of Trump-like candidate. I'm pretty sure everyone in the vote blue no matter who crowd would be screaming from the rooftop saying, oh, we need to investigate into this individual. But because it's Joe Biden and because he's the Democratic nominee, hands off. We can't talk about Joe Biden or any of his problems because we got to beat Trump because Trump's such a bad guy. Look, Trump is a horrible individual, but Joe Biden, he is no saint. So, let's check out what the fuss is about. These are 4 different video clips of Chris Hayes speaking to a journalist who was on a show in which he was doing some investigative work into Tara Reade's story.
Prior Me Too era, there have been moments, I think for many of us, all of us, when we have heard about accusations against someone that we find ourselves desperately wanting not to believe. Whether that is because we have some personal admiration for the individual or their work, or political admiration, someone on our quote-unquote side. But part of the difficult lesson of the Me Too era is not that every accusation is true and everything should be believed on its face, but that you do have to fight yourself when you feel that impulse. You have to do that in order to take seriously what is being alleged and what the evidence is and to evaluate it. And that is the case with the accusation by a woman named Tara Reade against Joe Biden. Reade briefly worked as a Senate aide in Biden's office in the early 90s. Last year, she told a California newspaper that in 1993, Joe Biden, quote, touched her several times, making her feel uncomfortable. Now, at that time, Reade was one of several women who came forward around that moment with accusations against the former vice president of inappropriate sort of over physicalness, touching, kissing, or hugging that they say made them feel uncomfortable. Then last month, she made a much more serious allegation, telling first a podcast and later the New York Times that in 1993, Joe Biden pinned her to a wall in the Senate building, reached under her clothing, and penetrated her with his fingers. Reade told the Times that she filed a complaint with the Senate that same year about what happened with Biden. Quote, she said she did not have a copy of it and such paperwork has not been located. Now, Reade also said she complained to Biden's executive assistant, as well as to 2 top aides about harassment by Mr. Biden, not mentioning the alleged assault. All 3 of those people who were interviewed by the Times deny having any memory of a complaint. A spokeswoman for Joe Biden says the allegation is false, and they have strongly denied it. This week, there was also a new development in the story, and that is that Tara Reade's former neighbor at the time went on the record with her name, telling Business Insider that in 1995 or 1996, a few years after this, that Reade told her she had been assaulted by Biden. NBC News reached out to Reade's neighbor, who later confirmed by text message the story. This on-the-record reporting from a neighbor, a roughly contemporaneous relaying of the story, has rightly occasioned a new round of coverage and scrutiny, while also creating some serious tension within the progressive.
All right, so Chris Hayes makes a very good point, especially in the beginning. Look, there might be people we admire, there might be people we respect, but if they abuse their power, if they hurt people, we got to hold them accountable. We got to investigate into what they have done and who they've hurt. And I understand that everyone has Trump derangement syndrome. I understand that people are afraid of Trump. But like I said before, Joe Biden, he's no saint. He's got flaws too. And we have to look into the story. And Tara Reade's story is adding up. It's making more sense. More people are looking into it, and something happened. Something happened to Tara Reade when she used to work for Joe Biden when he was a senator. And Chris Hayes shouldn't be fired because he did his job. So, special shout out to Case Study QB, who actually managed to get this video clip up on social media. I think it's important we share this. But let's check out this second video clip out. And I think it's very important that we actually hear what this reporter is talking about.
Of coalition about how the Biden camp should or is responding. And for more on that, I'm joined now by Rebecca Traister, writer at large from New York Magazine, who just published this piece about the allegations titled The Biden Trap. Rebecca, first, maybe take me through how you have tracked this story over its development and your sort of evaluation of it.
Well, I've been watching it and reading about it with, obviously intense interest. It had a sort of reverse course from some of the Me Too reporting that broke through in the fall of 2017, the reporting done by Jodi Kantor, Megan Twohey, and Ronan Farrow on Harvey Weinstein, in that it didn't start out as a massive investigative report. It actually, Tara Reade first made the full accusation of assault in a podcast interview with Katie Halper. And so initially it didn't have the sort of full, we've talked to 100 people, we've gone through these documents, and that sort of happened in reverse in this case. And so I have been reading with great interest as sort of different portions of the story have either been denied or seemingly confirmed. And I think it's one of those cases where there's going to be more reporting, and we're going to learn more about what we think of these claims with every story that's done. And I bet there are a lot of reporters, I know there are a lot of reporters out there working on it right now.
In terms of the sort of, I think one of the things that happened in the Me Too era was thinking about how to evaluate claims like this and what evidence is sort of corroborative and what's dispositive, and the fact that in almost all cases it's extremely difficult to arrive at some definitive accounting in the sort of evidentiary record. I will say that in following this, one of the things that happened in Me Too and a piece of evidence that has risen in how I evaluate these stories is a somewhat contemporaneous disclosure to a trusted person who then tells a reporter about it. That is what has happened here. And to me, that has been, in terms of what the evidentiary record is, has raised it a bit in my own view of this.
Okay, so Chris Hayes' guest is speaking out about, what she did in regards to investigating the Tara Reade's allegations. And the whole idea of journalism, especially being an investigative journalist, is to get to the bottom of what exactly happened. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's journalism 101. Let's actually look into Tara Reade's story. Let's actually find out what's going on. Let's actually do our job and hold those people in power accountable. But hang on. There's another part of the video clip that we need to check out.
I feel the same way. I actually thought that the Times reporting, which was very inconclusive on the assault claim, corroborated for me something, which was her claim that she had complained about harassment and then suffered a professional consequence while working in Biden's office. The New York Times reporting on this story actually backed that up for me a couple of weeks ago, because it found a couple of interns who she had supervised who remembered her suddenly being taken off of, having suddenly and without explanation, no longer supervising them. That was pretty persuasive for me on that count. The assault claim, obviously I'm waiting for more reporting on it. But as reporters and as readers, this is what we look for, for journalistic corroboration. As you say, a contemporaneous, somebody who's willing to go on the record. The other thing about the neighbor, Linda Lacasse, who was Reade's former neighbor, is that she says she's a Biden supporter. And that she still intends to vote for Joe Biden. So that sort of addresses the question of, is there a political motivation here for her recalling this? And yes, I think it's a very strong piece of corroborating evidence. And, it was persuasive for me, too.
This point about, obviously what hangs over this is that Joe Biden appears to be the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party, that he will be running against a president who has bragged about sexual assaults, who's been accused of sexual assault by a dozen and a half women. Right now, there's a woman, E. Jean Carroll, who has accused him on the record of raping her in Bergdorf Goodman, and has two people on the record contemporaneously saying she told them the story at the time. One urged her to go to the police. She's currently suing him because he dismissed the story. And of course, that is not exculpatory for whatever the facts may be with Joe Biden, but in the political context of how progressives and feminists and liberals think about this, it's inescapable and also sort of impossible. Your thoughts, Rebecca?
And in addition to the claims made against Donald Trump, the person, there is also Donald Trump's record of and promises around governance. He is going to be in a position, if he is reelected, to appoint people to the...
So, again, while doing more investigative work, looking into Tara Reade's allegations, they start talking to people that Tara Reade has spoken to about her assault from Joe Biden, especially from her neighbor, who did say that she would vote for Joe Biden. Okay, all right. But it's adding up. It's the same kind of details that Tara Reade has told other people. So, in other words, this story, it's not political. No, something happened to Tara Reade. And other people are basically confirming, like, yeah, Tara Reade has told us about this assault. Tara Reade has told us what exactly happened. And it's all adding up. It's all making sense. Plus, remember, like I said before, Tara Reade was part of Joe Biden's staff, and then somehow she's gone. So this requires all of us to take a step back and look at this whole story and realize that Tara Reade is a brave individual who's stepping up and actually asking people for help and wanting to hold Joe Biden accountable. Tara Reade, remember, went to Senator Kamala Harris's campaign and Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign in regards to talking about Joe Biden and didn't get any help. Went to Time's Up, didn't get any help. So she went to anyone who would help. And she's not doing this to sabotage Joe Biden's campaign. No, she's doing this to tell her story. She was assaulted. She was hurt. And let's not forget that in 1993, apparently her mother called into Larry King's show talking about the same kind of thing. Something happened. But hashtag fire Chris Hayes because he did his job as a journalist to talk about this and actually bring on another investigative journalist to talk about her work and what she has found. Yes, we need to talk about this. We shouldn't censor it. Just because, your guy is going up against Trump, that we can't hold him accountable, we can't look into his past, because Joe Biden, look, he has a whole sad history of being on the wrong side of politics. Remember, this is a guy who was against busing and desegregation. This is a guy who supported the credit card corporations in 2005 to make student debt what it is. This is a guy who voted for the war in Iraq and so many other disastrous decisions. So yes, I get that Trump's a horrible person. But Biden, he abused his power too, and he's been in politics longer than Trump has. So maybe we're scratching the surface of this, because there's probably much more to the story than we already know. And we, as journalists, have to look into this. We have to look into all these world leaders and politicians and hold them accountable if they abuse their power. But hold on. There's one last thing I want to bring up, and that is this final video clip.
Supreme Court, he already has. That's a generation's worth of lawmaking in this country that is going to, if Donald Trump makes those appointments, going to be terrible for women, and especially women, particularly in vulnerable communities. What he's, his record on the environment, enfranchisement, the democracy is imperiled, and women, and particularly vulnerable women, are especially imperiled. So progressive feminist women have every reason to support his opponent. However, what this is creating is a kind of perfect storm where the women who are being asked to support his opponent are now also being asked to answer for these charges, in part because of the vacuum created by Joe Biden, who is not yet really directly answering these questions, and certainly not doing what I wish he would, which is to say, please direct your questions about these allegations to me and not the women that are out there offering their support to my candidacy.
Yeah, the man in question, the nominee, the former vice president, is going to have to address them and not have Stacey Abrams or anyone else or Kristen Gillibrand be the ones to do that. Rebecca Traister, your piece was fantastic, and thank you so much for making some time tonight.
Yes, Trump's a horrible person, and if he gets reelected, the Supreme Court will be conservative for quite some time. That will be Trump's legacy for the United States Supreme Court. He will be choosing the next justices. So that's a very serious issue, and a lot of people are scared. But Joe Biden, like I said before, is his own worst enemy. He's having his surrogates and his campaign speak for him. Joe Biden is going to have to address these allegations. He's going to have to show up online, do another one of his town halls, and talk about these allegations. He, himself, no one else, not his wife, not his top surrogates, not his campaign managers, nobody. Joe Biden will have to speak about this because, again, the story is adding up. More and more people are basically confirming that, yes, Tara Reade has been talking about her assault from Joe Biden. Tara Reade's story is adding up. More people are confirming that, yes, he's in the exact same details that these things happened to Tara Reade. So, Joe Biden, you're going to have to present yourself. But just because, everyone is having Trump derangement syndrome, that doesn't mean we need to now call for the firing of journalists. I mean, what's next? You're talking about ending somebody's career because they did a story. And as a journalist, you're supposed to cover stories, even if it makes people feel upset, especially if it's somebody that people admire or is their last best hope to beat Donald Trump. I hate to tell this to y'all, but this is just my opinion. Biden is a flawed candidate from the beginning. He is somebody that has not earned my vote. I will be voting third party. And again, looking at his past history, I'm convinced that Joe Biden, he's not sorry for his past actions. And the fact that he has other people speaking for him just shows you how much of a coward he is. And if you don't think that Donald Trump won't use this against Joe Biden during the entire general election, I'm sorry, you're living in another world, because probably when the debates happen, and they will happen, Trump is going to use this story against Joe Biden. And the fact that Joe Biden hasn't been speaking about it says a lot about him and his campaign. And Trump will capitalize on that, because that's who Donald Trump is. We have two individuals who are horribly flawed and right now running for the highest office of the land. But yet, I think right now, for most of the vote blue no matter who crowd, they got their blinders on. They don't care. They just don't care. They just want to ignore and hope that it'll all go away. But going on social media, doing this trend of hashtag fire Chris Hayes, it doesn't do you any good. And plus, with these two photos that I'm going to share with you guys, social media is never going to forget. And a lot of people are going to be calling out the hypocrisy of the vote blue no matter who crowd and the Biden supporters, because this story that happened to Tara Reade, just a quick reminder, there are 7 other women who have similar stories of sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment from Joe Biden. Check these 2 photos out. All right, so those 2 photos, have them up each maybe 20 seconds, and then I'm going to be responding to it in 3, 2, 1. So, final note. Hashtag fire Chris Hayes. Waste of time. He didn't do anything wrong. He did his story. He did his job. He talked about the Tara Reade allegations. I mean, better late than never, corporate media, but hashtag fire Chris Hayes. I mean, I assumed when I first saw this that, okay, he did something wrong. He abused his power. No, he didn't do anything wrong. What he did was go up against the norm of the establishment and the vote blue no matter who crowd, because he's right now bringing a very serious story to light, and people need to know. That's the whole idea of journalism. And when there's a story like this out there, people need to know, people need to find out, and people need to get the facts. And it's becoming quite clear that Joe Biden has abused his power, has abused women. I mean, there's a whole treasure trove of videos of him being really creepy towards, women and young girls. And again, his own personal behavior. Actions speak louder than your words. And this is the guy that somehow is going to beat Donald Trump. This general election is going to be a nightmare. The debates are going to be a disaster. So, this is the state that we're in. This is why we got to change our whole political system. And more importantly, too, we need to have more respect for journalists, especially when they're covering stories. Yes, there might be somebody you respect. Yes, there might be somebody that you admire. But if they abuse their power, people need to know. This is Kit with Hard Lens Media, and this is Perspectives. Peace, everyone.